Welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the Deferred Sales Trust, is the best way for you to grow your wealth. I'm your host, Brett Swartz. In each episode, I am joined by some of the best real estate, financial, and wealth minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration. So together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. I'm excited about our next guest. He's from the beautiful, amazing place of Dublin, Ireland, and he has a team behind him, and he runs an amazing group. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. But he was raised in Dublin, Ireland, and he started his career at Procter Gamble and spent 18 years at PepsiCo, where he served as a vice president and general manager for a $3 billion non-carbonated beverage portfolio, and then the New York market unit. He also now focuses on purchasing non-performing mortgages as an experiment at that time for himself, but it became a cornerstone of a new career. So he kind of found a passion in this. And within 2 years, he liquidated a significant rental portfolio, left corporate life, and launched Automation Finance to help investors automate their future finances. As CEO, he oversees Automation Finance's management of $200 million of distressed mortgages. Please welcome to the show with me, Paul Birkett. Hey, Paul, how you doing?
Brett, you make me sound fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And glad to have you on the show, and looking forward to learning a little more about yourself and your current focus. So would you start with that? Would you give us a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Yeah, well, this is really, like you said, my second act. I did almost 25-year corporate career, climbing up the greasy pole. I got to the US. I was not educated in the US. I did not live in the US until 2010. Got here, and your listeners will remember 2010. The real estate market was on its knees at that time, and I was able to start buying single family homes to rent, and I got up to about 30 of them. And a chance short sale became a note sale, where the bank was sold the loan before I was able to complete the short sale as the buyer of the end unit. And that piqued my interest as to how an individual could become the owner of a residential mortgage. And so fast forward 6 years, we've got about 2,500 of them. We're now up to about $250 million of non-performing and performing mortgages that we manage, with just a team of 6 people. Now, anyone who's in the rental business would be amazed, because to manage 2,500 rental homes, you could not do that with 6 people. But on the mortgage side, it's much more scalable business, because you've no operational requirements, or at least you have a much reduced number of operational requirements in terms of running that portfolio.
Very well said. And I got to pick your brain after this, because we do our business is similar in that we provide promissory notes for sellers of highly appreciated assets, and
Right.
our managing of that is of the promissory note and the terms and the payments and the streams and the investments and such. So,
Right.
but before we go there, and before we dive into your story, because that is incredible, 2,500 plus mortgages.
Yeah.
I want to take our listeners maybe a step back, and maybe this is in the Ireland days, right? First of all, I love your accent, by the way. I love when we ever have people on the show that have a different accent. And you probably think I have an accent, right, too? So it's a little bit different, but that's really neat. So I want to focus though on this.
Yeah.
Who was, Paul growing up, and not so much just like who or what you did. I actually want to focus on the strengths maybe you believe you were given. I believe we've all been given certain gifts in this life, and some people call them, our strengths. Some people call them superpowers. I believe they're God-given gifts, and I believe these gifts are given to us to be able to be a blessing or help to others. So what's that a unique ability, or those unique gifts that you believe you were given, and how does that help how you help people today?
I think that if I have a superpower, it's the ability to make a lot out of not very much. I certainly wasn't the smartest kid in school. I'm obviously not the best looking. And so anything I've done has been through the help of others, but just through being kind of relentless. And I often describe myself as having a higher pain tolerance than most other people. So a lot of what you do in this business, for example, dealing with borrowers where basically you're in the business of buying loans, mortgage loans secured on their home, where they're not making payments every month. Some will have not made a payment for 5 years, but lots of them will make a payment, then skip a few, then make one and make a partial payment and so on. And so a lot of the conversations with the borrower is listening to them making promises that they have no intention of keeping. And so that can be very frustrating, or you just put your head down and manage to your key performance indicators. The more calls, the more contacts, the more deals. And so the early bird getting the worm, it couldn't be more true. The harder you work, the luckier you get. And so we're a small team, just 6 people, but we can do a lot with that. And I don't
Absolutely.
think that, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't want to cut you off. Go ahead.
And I don't think I have any special talent. I would say I could say with certainty I am the dumbest person in the room at work, but that's just fine because the role that I have is to go and find loans for us to buy, and also to manage our investor base. And so being too smart actually doesn't help you with either of those things. I'm just an ordinary guy, and I'm dealing with just ordinary other guys who are either our investors or our homeowners who we're trying to help get back on track, so they can keep their home instead of being foreclosed out and them losing it.
Amazing. So much there, and I love what you said. A higher pain tolerance than most others,
Hmm.
relentless, and making a lot out of not very much. But one particular thing that really also stuck out to me was this. You said listening to people make promises that they don't intend keeping. Okay,
Yeah,
and I imagine after 2,500 deals, right, and just
yeah,
seeing the patterns and the challenges that people face, right? Let's face it. 2008 to 2011 in real estate was one of some of the darkest times in American history for homeowners, right? It
right.
was brutal, and now, but yeah, you provide a service to help them work out their their position, right, in order to try to make it a win-win for the bank, for yourself, and for them, right, as much as
Hmm.
you possibly can. So, but I
Right.
want to focus on that one part you put. What is the next best secret to helping get past that when you're hearing somebody say something that A, they don't probably intend keeping it, right? B, they may not even know that they don't plan on keeping it, but C, maybe they do and they're just willfully telling you that. What's the next place to try to take the conversation or take the relationship?
We deal with broadly two types of client, so two types of borrowers. And just to say a little bit about these guys, so the average home is about 100 to $150,000. So these are not Malibu mansions. The average credit score of the borrower is probably got a 5 or a 6 at the beginning. So these are not high credit borrowers. They typically will not have had the advantages that you and I have had in terms of education and so on. And so they live sometimes through lack of planning, sometimes through lack of education, sometimes through irresponsibility. They live hand to mouth. And so part of my job is making sure I get to the bank account first so they make their mortgage payment. Because if there's any money left at the end of the month, that money is going to get spent on things that probably don't improve their quality of life in any meaningful way, or add to the security of their retirement, or is in any way beneficial to them in the long run. So part of what we're doing is tough love. And the borrowers fall into two camps. One borrower is someone who got sick at work, was off work for 6 or 8 months, fell behind on their mortgage, couldn't catch up. The bank would not do a deal with them because typically banks are not able to do deals with them. And so they sell the loan to someone like us. And we're not bound by the rules the banks are bound by. And so we can do any deal we want. We can forgive all those 6 months of missed payments, to take an easy example. But we can also reduce their interest rate or extend the term of the loan. And that's a one-off issue, a life event. The life event is now solved. Now we need to solve the mortgage related part of that. The other type are people who, let's call them strategic defaulters, people who just don't pay. They don't pay anybody. And when you look at their credit, They've got lines of credit all over the place. They've got liens against them. They've got liens on their car. They've got liens on everything, and they just don't want to pay. And so some of them will pay, because ultimately the beauty about this business is, if you choose not to work with me, and working with me couldn't be any easier. I'm trying to help you keep your home, and for a payment that was less than you were paying before I came along. If you won't work with me, then ultimately the house will be foreclosed on and you'll be a renter again. And so that's a pretty big stick. The pretty big carrot is, if you do the deal that we're working on, your mortgage payment will be 75% of what your rent payment would be. So why wouldn't you keep the home that you live in for 75% of what it would rent for and keep an appreciating asset? Now that sounds like a win-win, but that's a difficult pitch to make. And so that can take from first contact with the borrower to getting a deal done and the first payment in, can be 5 months, 6 months.
I love how simply you clarified the bottom line, right, with them,
Right.
right, where you're saying your mortgage payment right now, the way we're trying to, make this, forgive some of the past debt, lower your interest rate, make it
Right.
manageable. 75%, let's say on an average deal, right, of what the
Mm-hmm.
rent would be,
Right.
if you were to get foreclosed on.
Right.
And so why wouldn't you want to keep the home you're in, right? Have an opportunity for an appreciating asset, not be
Mm-hmm.
a renter, and pay 25% less. Um, it's pretty clear cut. And by the way, curious, are you setting that? Is that kind of the number you
Yeah.
found, that you want to get what the average rent is in the area and lower it by 25% and try to match that loan? Or is that?
Yeah. And the reason we do that is because there's an awful lot of work in the upfront part, a bit like buying a house that you want to rent out. You've got to find the house, you've got to apply for the mortgage, you've got to get the mortgage, you've got to buy the house, you've got to renovate it a little, you've got to do all that stuff, and then you rent it out. A mortgage is somewhat similar. You've got to get the borrower, you've got to build trust, you've got to do a deal, you've got to get the deal in place. If I go for the max payment that this borrower can possibly afford, I know that within 6 months they'll stop paying again. And then I've got to go through all that pain again. So I want to go with a deal that is so attractive that you've got to be dumb to not want to do it, because you could just rent the house out and keep the 25% for yourself, or stay and live in it, whichever you prefer. I have no preference. Our company doesn't mind one way or the other. What we want to do is build a large portfolio of performing loans that pay every month. And that's how our whole business model works, because we take the monthly payments from the homeowners and we use those to pay our investors. And that's how the whole thing works.
Mm-hmm. So you're making the deal so attractive, and also for I don't know if it's the right word, but realistic for them, right?
Yeah,
And enough margin where they can win, right? They can win
right.
because you're right. A lot of folks who are in these circumstances or lack the education, or have some big life events, or have some big challenges. So again, if you can make it a win-win for them, right?
Yeah,
If you can make it a win-win for you, your company and investors, and then the bank is happy too, because they're able to sell off that non-performing note to someone like yourself, Paul, in your group, Automation Finance,
yeah.
to make it a win. Is that a fair summary?
Well, except a bit about the bank being happy. The bank's
Mm.
not so happy because they're taking a loss. We're paying about 60 cents on the dollar for these loans. So if I was to say to you, hey, I can buy home, an actual piece of real estate for 60 cents on the dollar, it would be a stampede to the door. But because we're buying the mortgage, it's not quite so easy to understand. And it's not as simple as an eviction. You've got to go through that foreclosure process. And some people would say, hey, I'd much rather buy the loan, foreclose, evict the family, renovate the home, and sell it on Flip That Home TV, or those shows you see. We just fundamentally, we don't think that really benefits the investor that much. You don't make that much more money by doing all of that work, and it's a lot more work. It's much less scalable, and it doesn't really help society that well. If you go to any neighborhood, you don't really want lots of foreclosures in a neighborhood because it reduces the real estate values in the whole neighborhood. You want all the loans to be cured as quickly as possible. And so that's our thesis, and that's what we're doing.
Beautiful. I absolutely love it. And I can tell why you're so good at automating and doing it with 6 people and doing the scale you've done it, because you have an ability to take what's, maybe more complex, or put it this way, how to make a lot of not very much, right? You
Right,
probably don't have a lot of time to capture and connect with people to give them clarity on what they have, and that, hey, you're actually on their side and you want to make this a
right,
win-win for the borrower who's in default. And
correct.
so love that. So let's dive into maybe the 3 secrets, Paul, that every real estate investor who's listening to this, because a lot of my clients, a lot of my partners were more in the side of the hard assets, meaning owning
Right,
multifamily, senior housing, assisted living, mobile home parks, or not
right.
as much on the side of the finance. Although I recently just put in with the group that I'm working with, my first, I guess, in the hard money lending business, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
They're actually lending to fix and flippers, right? Who are
Sure.
doing that on that side. But what is the biggest secret do you believe that traditional real estate investors and hard assets are missing when it comes to the, I guess, more of an alternative business like you're in?
They underestimate how much time they're actually spending on their business, and therefore they're overestimating their real returns. So by that I mean they don't count the time of driving around on a Saturday looking at all the homes. They don't count all the time spent in Home Depot looking for materials. They don't, because it's kind of in the gray area maybe of hobby for them, whereas we don't spend any time doing anything that's not building shareholder value. So from the second we come in the morning to the second we leave at night, we're in direct interaction with borrowers where we're either talking to a law firm, talking to a borrower, or 5 or 6 other things that drive value and nothing else. And so I think that people coming from the real estate side don't really get it, that while, yes, it's to do with housing and it's similar to a house, it is not a house. And this is simply a financing transaction. And so we get a lot of people coming. So we recently launched, what's about a year ago now, we launched an SEC regulated fund, which means that ordinary members of the public can invest alongside Wall Street folks. All our money so far has come from Wall Street. And so we've made about 17% a year since we started. And a lot of that was going to the Wall Street partners. Now what we've done is with the Reg A fund, with the SEC registered fund, we basically split that return with the investor. So the investor gets a target return of 8%, and we use the other 8% or 9% to run the business and pay all the salaries and so on. And so that's how that has worked.
Pause there. I
Go
want to I
ahead.
want to capture that because that was just so good,
Yeah.
Paul. They underestimate their time they spend on their business, therefore they overestimate their returns. And
Yes.
so the practical part of it is, yeah, going to the Home Depot or driving and looking at different properties or touring different properties
Right.
or doing things that, like you said, they're not necessarily, let's say, KPIs, right? Key performance indicators that are going to
Right.
actually bring value to the bottom line for the client or for the investor, for the business, for the returns. These sometimes they get lost in the gray area where it's like, part of it could be a hobby. They just enjoy doing those things, right?
Sure.
And they don't realize that at the end of the day, there's only certain things that are going to make you money. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, for sure. For
Excellent.
sure.
So maybe secret number two, or unless you want to follow up on anything more on that, or what's like the next secret that traditional real estate investors are missing.
I think they don't start with the end in mind. So they're out generally looking for something, but they're not specific enough about what it is exactly that they want. They may say a target yield of 9% or 8% or 12%, but what does that really mean? And as someone who's invested in war zone type properties, the headline number of 15% was possible, but for the 5 years that I did it, I don't think I ever got it. And that's over 15, 16 units, managing them with a specialist manager. Yeah, you've got to really pressure test the the reality of what you have in your pro forma.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the last one is really beat the business plan to death before you execute it. I would say I've done multifamily, I've done uh, fix and flip, I've done um, single family rentals, and I've done mortgage. And on all of them, the business plan was unrealistic. And on all of them, I could have made the business plan more realistic, a lot more easily than the pain of going through deals that don't work or that end up you just get your money back after a year of hard work. And the super normal returns, like the really big wins that I've had, could never have been in the plan. So it's unfair to add in the supernormal returns and say, well, on a blended basis, I did okay. The fundamental problem is your plan needs to be really rock solid, and you want to go and find people who disagree with you and tell you your numbers are wrong, and really listen to those people because they're usually right.
Very well said. Now I want to shift a little bit. 2020 created some major challenges and some major uncertainty. In 2021, let's see what happens, right?
Yeah.
Um, Now, what's the value of investing in notes, right? Versus and more so, how do we lower risk as real estate investors by investing in notes versus just investing in real estate and maybe taking on all of that debt and all those eviction control laws and rent control
Mm-hmm.
laws and all of the major things challenging so many major cities?
Yeah.
Give us just the overall perspective of, hey, you want to lower your risk and get some solid returns. Here's make the argument that this is why this is better than just traditional real estate right now.
Well, I think it's not better or worse, it's just different. It's part of a diversified portfolio. So our fund has been paying out, we've never missed any payments. So who knows what happens in the future, right? It's an investment, like any investment has some risk, but it's 8% preferred return. We don't earn any money until the investor gets their 8% and their capital returned. So we get paid last. So and that's investing in assets that we're buying at about 60 to 65 cents on the dollar. So there's no safe investments, but I've all my money in this and almost no money anywhere else, because I look at it and say, well, hold on, I'm buying stuff for 65 cents on the dollar and I can return 16% a year for the last 6, 7 years now. Maybe I can't in the future, but it looks pretty good to me right now.
Yeah,
And
no,
so go ahead.
no, you go ahead. I want you to finish your thought. Sorry.
Investors come to us. We get three different types of investors. One are IRA type investors. They've got a self-directed retirement fund, and they come with 30 or 40,000, and they say, "Hey, you can grow this for me at 8% a year. That would be wonderful for me because it looks safe to them. It looks safe to me too, but there's no such thing as safe. But compared to all the other alternatives, it doesn't look any more risky than the other alternatives that they're looking at." So they'll put money in and leave it there for a while. Another group will be, they tend to come in with much smaller sums of money, just a few thousand, and they're testing the water. They might put in 5 grand or something, and they'll just see how it goes. Do they get their check every month like they're supposed to? So every month they'll get their check for whatever it is, 30 bucks or whatever. And then the third group are more sophisticated investors who have cash that they're sitting on waiting for a deal. And so they'll put in a bigger chunk of money and say maybe it's 50,000 or whatever, let's say 50,000. And they're waiting because there's a deal coming in January or February or March. And currently the money is sitting in the bank earning 15 basis points or something. And we'll pay a target return of 8%, and we offer best efforts liquidity. So if you need to get the cash back out, give us notice, and the next loan settlement we get, we will use that money to repurchase your units from you. So it's not like a mutual fund. You can sell it at noon and get the money at 2, but you can get out in a short-ish period of time, assuming the company has the cash to make that redemption.
Very well said. And on that, just real quick on those some of those key things there. So
Yeah.
30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and I know it's not guaranteed because you got to still sell those and the business has got to be able to do it. But generally speaking, when people make those requests, how soon are you able to return their investment?
Well, this is a 5-year fund with 4 years left to run. And so if you shouldn't be planning on putting money in here and taking it out after 60 or 90 days. Most people are putting it in for the full period of time, and that's what the fund is designed for. It is by no means a liquid fund. Um, and we've only had 2 people take money out, so I can't really give you a meaningful answer to that. And they were both very small. I think they were under 10. I don't recall the number. They were under 10,000 for sure. And
Fair
I think
enough.
we did it the same day.
Yeah.
So that's fine. But let's say there was another 2008 crash and everyone wanted their money out the same day. We definitely won't have the money. You're going to be stuck in until the market improves, because it's unlikely loans are going to pay off in a 2008 environment.
Correct. Yep. Very well said. And I appreciate you sharing both sides of that. It's great. So
Yeah.
the other thing is, do the investors need to be accredited investors?
No. Anyone with $250 to invest. It was actually my idea to make it open to anyone. And I kind of regret that. I fought a few people at the time. They said, you're just going to create an awful lot of admin for yourself. And I was entirely wrong. And they were entirely right, because we did get a lot of $250 investors. And they're wonderful to have those people, because what we're trying to do is help people along, people who maybe haven't invested before. This gets them started. They get the feeling for not just spending all the money that they have, but investing some of it. But I didn't anticipate the amount of questions and interaction that we would get from the smaller investors. And so when we do the next fund, we probably will make that maybe 5,000 or something, just to we don't have the resources to field all the questions that we get every day.
Yep. I totally get it. Totally relate. So I appreciate that. Excellent. So you ready for the lightning round, Paul?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So knowing what you know now, if you could go back to your 25-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget that you would make sure that you would tell yourself?
Do the job you're about to accept for no more than 5 years, then go and start your own business. It doesn't matter what business it is, you will learn by doing. You may start off in business A and end up in business Z. It doesn't matter. You will figure it out as you go.
Amazing. What's the one book you've recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
Stephen Covey's 7 Habits.
Excellent. Best negotiation tip?
It sounds like this isn't a deal you're going to be able to do.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when people are negotiating back and forth, if you come from the point of view of your position versus their position, that increases the friction between the two parties. If you say to the other party, if you accuse them of being unable to do the deal, they then need to come back, wait, no, I can do that. I can do that deal. I can choose to do that deal. And so that pushes the parties closer together. And if they say, yes, they can do it, then the question is, well, okay, well, what is the impediment to actually getting this thing done? And moves it away from price or terms or whatever, depending on what the deal is.
So much wisdom there. You can write a book on that, Paul. I love that. What are you curious about right now?
Crypto.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's gone. I remember when I first heard about it, I thought it was nonsense. And that was when it was maybe $5 for one Bitcoin. And then it got up to $5,000, and I thought, this is absolutely nuts. What on earth is going on here? And I started researching it a little bit, and I completely discounted it, because the people with the guns are the people who print the currency. And so the people with the guns are the governments, and they have armies. And if you're trying to launch a parallel currency against the people who do the taxation and the spending, that's going to draw you into pretty harsh conflict pretty quickly. And I was completely wrong about that, because Bitcoin has flourished and went from $5,000 to $22,000 or $3,000 it is this week. Now, next week it'll be 30,000, and the week after it might be 15,000. And I can't live with that volatility. But it is very interesting to me that something that seemed so bizarre has found some sort of a foothold in society.
Very well said. And wow, I can't agree with you more. Last question. This is my favorite question because it's going to help hopefully encapsulate everything we've talked about and get us and help us to get to know your success habits a little bit more. And it's this: after all your success, after Procter and Gamble success in the corporate world, and then moving to an entrepreneur in automation finance and all the success there, over 2,500 homes and everything you've shared with us, I'm curious, Paul, how do you stay centered in your values, and how do you stay encouraged to reach for new heights or new goals?
I think that your values don't change too much. So, or at least I'm pretty happy with the values that I have. The thing I really get excited about is helping the younger team members learn the business and grow the business. And I've done something that has always been fairly easy to do, which is surround yourself with better people than you are. And so I openly say it on our weekly calls that I'm the dumbest person in the room, and I'm totally comfortable with that. The joy I get is helping other people grow, making the money and stuff. That's fantastic. And it's lovely to get cards, especially this time of year at the holidays, thanking me for helping them and help them keep their home, or our investors for whom we've made money. But the thing I really like is helping people who just out of school or maybe have had one job, who come join us, and 2 or 3 years later, they're running due diligence on a $10 million purchase. So it's more those thrills than the money is just numbers.
Absolutely love it, Paul. Well, I want to thank you for sharing so much with us in this short period of time, and I want to encourage you to keep using the gifts that you've been given to bless others and help others and make a big impact for investors and for your team members and homeowners who are struggling and need a way out. And for our listeners who maybe want to get in touch with you, Paul, and learn a little more about you, where can they find you?
Well, the best thing to do is just go to automationfinance.com. If you're interested in investing, we pay an 8% preferred return. We offer best efforts liquidity, and we're buying mortgages on single family homes at about 60 to 65 cents on the dollar. But it's not a risk-free investment. There are no risk-free investments. If you want to get in contact with me, I'm on LinkedIn. You'll find me through the website. We're raising money right now. Obviously, with the coronavirus, there are a lot of people who are behind on their mortgages. So there will be a lot of loans to buy the beginning of next year. And we're working on deals literally as we speak. So we'd love to work with anyone who's interested in investing. And we can help some ordinary Americans as we do it.
Well, Paul, I want to thank you again for being on the show. And that's, by the way, automationfinance.com. Amazing website here. If you're hearing this on iTunes, then you're not seeing the video, but I'm sharing the website right now. And Paul has his entire team. It has how he helps homeowners, about them, and the details here on the 8% and the minimums and how everything is paid, and then videos. So you can go to automationfinance.com to learn more about Paul and his team. And with that, I want to thank our listeners for listening to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. As always, we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the deferred sales trust and connecting with someone like Paul to get an 8% preferred return on mortgages is the best way for you to grow your wealth. With that, please rate, review, and subscribe to our channel. We appreciate you, and couldn't have the show without you. So thank you. And go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com, of course, if you have a big capital gains tax event on the sale of a high-end primary home, business, commercial real estate, and then also learn how you can turn around and invest that with groups like Paul. With that, we appreciate you.